class 12. Today in the video session I am going to continue with the chapter that is Kings, Farmers and Towns. Okay, in the last video we had finished with the Gupta Empire. Okay, the different empires during the time of 600 BCE to 600 CE. We learnt about the Magad Empire, the Mauryan Empire, and along with the Magad Empire or the Mauryan Empire, many other contemporary small states also had developed throughout the Indian subcontinent. We have learnt about that. Okay, so today we'll do on page number 38 of your textbook, part number 1, Kings, Farmers and Towns, and we are going to discuss the changing countryside. A changing countryside. Okay, that is page number 38. What do you mean here by a changing countryside? Here means how the time was passing by, the countryside was changing. Countryside here means the rural areas. Okay, it was changing, it was developing. We see some changes when we go through the different sources of sources of this period. Okay, so what are the sources which has helped us to know about the changing of the countryside of this place? These are mainly the texts. Text here, main examples are given in your book, the Jatakas and the Panchtantras. Okay, Jatakas, Jatakas, and Panchtantra, Panchtantra. Okay, these two books are books of Jainism and Buddhism. Okay, and when you read this book, you will get to know about the countryside of this period. Okay, means how were the people, their living, their standard of living, their connection with the king. Okay, then their different types of occupations. All these will come to know when we read these two texts. Okay, and so when the historians read those Jatakas and Panchtantras, they found that the countryside was changing gradually. Okay, and from this Jatakas and Panchantantras, we have come to know that there were some kings, those who were very wicked and cruel kings. Okay, from the Jatakas and Panchatantra books we have come to know, okay, that the kings were sometimes found to be wicked kings, and mainly in which Jataka we have found to know, that is from Ganda Tindu Jataka. You get in your book, Ganda Tindu Jataka. Okay, this book, Jataka tales are of different volumes. So this Ganda Tindu Jataka, it has mentioned about a king who was very wicked, and this king used to go in disguise to inspect his kingdom and hear the people talk about him. Okay, and when he went in disguise throughout his kingdom at night, he found that many people were cursing him. Why they were cursing him? For their miseries. Means the people were not happy in his kingdom. Okay, they were finding themselves in poverty. Okay, their lives were in misery, complaining that they were attacked by robbers at night. Means no security in the kingdom. Okay, and they were also being tortured by the tax collectors during the day. Okay, to escape from this situation, people were abandoning the village. They were running away from the village to different places. Okay, and not only in different places, also in forest. So as this story indicates, what? The relationship between the king and the subjects, or the king and the common people, means there were change in the qualities of the king of this period. Okay, as time was passing by, gradually we find they were not good kings. Okay, so this Jataka story, it tells about that. And from this Jataka and Panchtantra, we come to know about different strategies for increasing production. Okay, what do you mean by strategies for increasing production? In that period, what was the main economic activity? From where did the people get economy, money? They got it from cultivation, from agriculture. Okay, so they were now using some strategies. Strategies here means methods to increase their produce. Okay, like in this 21st century, we have so many different ways or strategies of production, isn't it, if of different field. But in that period, it's talking about 600 BC to 600 C, in the 6 centuries. Okay, what type of strategies, what type of methods people were using? Mainly here is about agriculture. So strategies for increasing production. Number one strategy was plough agriculture. Okay, people in the past, they did not know about plough. Now they started to use plough agriculture. Where? Mainly in the river valleys, that is in the plains, valleys of Ganga and the Kaveri. Kaveri is in the southern Deccan Plateau region, and in the northern was the Ganga Valley region. Number two, 6th century is mainly Iron Age. People had come to know about the metal iron. Now this hard iron was used in the plough. Okay, and iron tipped plowshare was being used, and this became very helpful for turning the alluvial soil in areas which had high rainfall. Okay, where high rainfall, plenty of abundance of agriculture could be done, and by using the iron tipped plowshare, the farmers could turn the alluvial soil and make the soil more fertile. Okay, number three, they started to use transplantation method. Okay, before, when farmers did not know about plough and all, the proper way of agriculture, they used to just scatter the seeds, okay, in the field, and that was how they used to get the harvest. But now they came to know about transplantation, mainly of the paddy, okay, used for paddy cultivation in areas where there was plentiful of water. So transplantation, they first scattered the seed in the nursery, okay, and when the plant became like 10 to 12 inches long, they used to remove it from the nursery and transplant into the other field, like how you see nowadays being done. Okay, so this was introduced. This was the new strategy used by the people of this 6th century. Okay, then number 4 was they started to apply irrigation. What is irrigation? Where do you use irrigation? In dry arid areas where there is less rainfall. Okay, so they started to do artificial supply of water, is known as irrigation. So how can you give artificial supply of water? With the help of digging wells, tanks and canals. So now the kings and the leaders and chiefs, okay, and also some wealthy people, they started to contribute their money, and the common people started to help in digging the wells, tanks and canals. So these were the different strategies for increasing production in this period. Okay, now we come to another part, that is discussion on differences in rural society. 5.3, how the countryside was changing. Okay, we see the relation between the king and the common people. Then number 2 was strategies for producing good produce, that is through the help of different ways of agriculture, plowshare, then irrigation, transplantation and all. Number 3 is differences in rural society. Okay, now we see that the society was having some differences among the people. So what are these? Differences in rural society, when you get that page number 39, there you will see in the column Gahapati. Okay, do you see there? Gahapati. What is Gahapati? Gahapati was the owner or the master or the head of the household. Okay, means in that time there was not a nuclear family. You cannot say the father as the head of that period. Okay, many families, they lived jointly, and one person who was the owner or the head of that household, he was known as the Gahapati, and he had access to control to the women of the household, the children of the household, the servants, slaves of the household, and also the property, means land, animals, okay, maybe forest in their name, all these were under his control, and that person was known as Gahapati. Okay, so in this rural society, we find that there were different types of people. They were divided according to their occupation. Okay, like peasants, those who worked in the fields and farms. Okay, peasants. Then there were artisans, potters, goldsmith, okay, blacksmith. All they were designated according to their occupation, and these all we have found also in the Sangam text, Sangam. You'll get in your paragraph there, Sangam text. It talks about the mainly you'll get the knowledge about the period of 6th century BC or 6th century up to 6th century, that of the Tamil places, that is South India. Okay, Tamilicum means the places around the southern Deccan. So from this text we come to know about the different divisions or division of society according to the occupation. Okay, in Tamilicum or in Sangam text we find landowners or Velar, plowmen or Uzwahar, and slaves or Adimai. Okay, according to their language, it has been given here the names. Okay, so society was divided according to the different occupation practiced by the people. Okay, now we come to next page, that is page number 40. Okay, page number 40, land grants and new rural elites. Okay, land grants and new rural elites. Okay, what do you mean by land grants? Grants, grants. Grants come from granted, to give. Okay, land being given. Okay, in this period we find that lands were being donated to religious institutions or also to religious priests like Brahmins. Okay, so evidence of land grants starts from 1st century. We have seen there is evidence of land grants being done from the 1st century. Okay, and number 2, land grants were recorded in inscription. Okay, land grants had been done, and that has been found by the archaeologists, and all these land grants have been found inscripted. Okay, what is inscription? Already in the last video I have already discussed. What is inscription? Inscription is writing done in a hard metal or a stone or wood with a very hard or pointed maybe a pointed weapon, implement, not weapon, implement. Maybe if you are doing it in a on a rock or a stone, you will need some hard thing like a iron tip, sharp thing, isn't it? So that is known as inscription. So land grants were recorded in inscription. Some of they have been found on stones. Most were found done on copper plates. As already I tell you that copper was the first metal known by man. Okay, so in this Iron Age, people had already come to know about copper, and whenever any land grant was done to any religious institution or the Brahmins, then it was been inscripted, okay, on copper plates mostly, and some have been done in rocks and stones too. Land granted to religious institutions or to Brahmanas by kings. Kings mainly did that, okay. And most inscriptions were done in which language? Sanskrit. Keep in mind, okay. Sanskrit was the main language used to do the inscription, and some local languages also have been inscripted. Those languages are mainly Tamil and Telugu language, okay. And now we come to the main term been given to the land granted to the Brahmanas. What was the land granted to the Brahmanas named as, known as? So those land were known as Agrahara. Okay, you'll get in your book. Okay, what is Agrahara? Agrahara were the lands granted to the Brahmanas or the religious institution. And Agrahara, Agrahara. So this question also comes. What do you mean by Agrahara? Agrahara are land donated or granted to the religious institutions or Brahmanas. Okay, and these lands were usually exempted from paying any tax or revenue. Okay, the Brahmanas, when they got that land as gift, they were exempted, they were excluded from giving any tax or revenue to the kingdom. Okay, and as well as they also got the right to collect taxes from the common people, these Brahmanas. Okay, and they did not used to go and work in this land. Suppose he had been given some farmlands, then the Brahmanas, they did not go and work on them. The common people, farmers, peasants, they used to come and work in their fields. Okay, some feel that land grants were strategy too. Now about the land grants, the historians have some debate, some arguments why land grant was done in that period by the kings. So there are 2 or 3 views. Number 1 view is that land grants were strategy to extend agriculture to new areas. Why did they granted lands, the kings, to extend the agriculture so that the agriculture produce may increase? So that was one reason, one view been given by a group of historians. Another historians group has said that kings were losing control over their samantas. Who were samantas? Samantas, already in the last video we have done, samantas were the powerful people, those who became sometimes more powerful than the king, and they used to rule the kings. Okay, so in fear of losing their control, these kings, okay, to be secure against the samantas, they tried to have to win allies, to win friends, okay, by making grants of land. Okay, that is why they used to grant land, the kings. They wanted to make friends so that those friends will support the king if the samantas tried to attack him or to get the land or the kingdom from him. Okay, then another view is from the other group of historians that there were regional variation in the sizes of land donated, ranging from small plots to vast stretches of uncultivated land, and the rights given to donees, the recipients of the grant. What is this? Let's see. There were regional variations in the size of land donated. Okay, land grants such as one have been found in several parts of the country. There were regional variations ranging from small plots to vast stretches. Means land was granted, but sometimes small plots were granted, sometimes huge vast land was being granted. Okay, sometimes uncultivable, sometimes cultivable land. So there was no particular being followed, particular system being followed by the king, that this land has to be given, or this amount of land has to be given, or cultivable land or uncultivable land has been, means there was no proper system. Okay, so in any way they used to grant the land. Okay, so now we come to this Manu Smriti. Did you get Agrahara? In your book you'll get Agrahara also in page number 41 in a pink column. Okay, in a pink column, this box, it's about Agrahara. So these pink color column box, these are very important for you all, for your syllabus. Okay, you read and write the question and answers. See what is an Agrahara. It has been given here in page 41. Okay, now we know, we'll go to Manu Smriti. Page number, wait, I'll tell you. This also is very important. So Manu Smriti you will get in page number 39. It's very important. Okay, page number 39, that source is there. Source number 6, the importance of boundaries. Means in this period the king had been advised by a very important legal text, legal book. This book is Manu Smriti, MANUSMRTI, written by Manu. Okay, the Manu Smriti is one of the best known legal texts of early India, and this book is written in Sanskrit and compiled between 2nd century BCE and 2nd century CE. This is what the text advises the king to do. Means in this text, this period, the kings, they were very vigilant and they had to follow certain rules and regulations. And in this Manu Smriti, the book has advised the kings to make their boundaries very secure, for not only for the king but for the whole kingdom. Okay, so what is the Manu Smriti tells about? It tells about the boundaries to be very it should be very strong. Okay, the boundaries of the kingdom should be very strong. Seeing that in the world controversies constantly arise due to the ignorance of boundaries, the king should have concealed boundary. Okay, still in today's time we find India, China, Nepal, all the boundary areas, we have so many controversies, Pakistan and all. Okay, because the boundaries still what we have, it's not enough. Okay, so here see in this Manu Smriti, it already had advised the king that the kingdom should be having a concealed boundary, markers buried, stones, bones, cow's hair, chaff, ashes, pots, herds, dried cow dung, bricks, coal, pebbles and sand. Means those boundaries should be concealed, hidden. Okay, and hidden boundaries, but the boundaries being made the materials which are being used, it should not be a perishable one. Okay, it should be a very unperishable, isn't it? So he should also have other similar substances that would not decay in the soil, buried as hidden markers at the intersection of boundaries. So this is how the Manusmriti had helped in this period to the kings to mark their boundaries and keep it concealed but strong, not perishable. Okay. Now we come to another, this one, in this period, whether the women folk, the female, they had any rights of having land grants or land in their names. But we get one inscription of this period, that is about Prabhavati Gupta. In source 8, page number 41, we'll get an inscription of a queen of that period, Prabhavati Gupta. Okay, she also got some land from she also got land in her name. Okay, why did she had an access to that land? Why? It says because she was the daughter of Chandragupta II. Okay, she was the daughter of Gupta Empire, that is Chandragupta II, and she got married to the Vakatakas. Vatakatas. Vakatakas are the powerful, kingdom in the Deccan of that period. Okay, so this inscription indicate that Prabhavati Gupta had access to land. And why she had access to land, not why don't we find other inscriptions of other women having access to land? This is because it was an exceptional case, because she was the queen, that is why she had access to land. Okay, now we move to towns and trade and new cities. Okay, in this period, how towns and trades had flourished. Towns and trades in page number 42, and new cities had developed. As we know, if trade is there, towns and cities starts to develop. Okay, so new cities were being seen. Number 1, many cities were the capitals of the Mahajanapadas. Okay, in the earlier videos, I have told you about the different Mahajanapadas of 6th century. So there were 16 of them, and the most important was the Magad. Okay, so as we gradually, as the time were passing, this period, it was moving towards formation of different cities, and different cities were coming up. Number 1, Patliputra, Patliputra, that was the capital of what? The Magad Empire, isn't it? So that became the important city because of the riverine routes. The river Ganga and its tributaries served as communication system. Okay, then the place Ujjaini, Ujjaini, Ujjaini was along land route. It was center of the land route. So Ujjaini. Then Puhar. Puhar was near the sea coast. Okay, so Puhar also became important here, and it was just near the sea coast for having overseas trade. Then another one is Mathura, Mathura. Mathura, it was a center of commercial, cultural and political activity. So these are some of the names of new cities which had come up during this period. So we come to the next paragraph. in your textbook 6.2, urban populations, elites and craftsmen, means how was the standard of living of the urban population, the people living in the urban areas, in towns and cities. So mainly the kings, okay, the kings and the ruling elites, they lived in fortified cities. The cities were fortified. What do you mean by fortified? Means a huge enormous wall was built throughout the kingdom, okay, surrounding the kingdom, and within that the king and his ruling elites as well as the common people, his subjects, used to live. Number two, people who lived in towns were people like washermen, then the goldsmith, blacksmith, okay, potter, and weavers. All these people, they lived in different groups, and these groups were known as Shrenis, Shrenis. Okay, so the question comes, what do you mean by Shrenis? Shrenis means division of the groups of guilds, okay, or the craftsmen or the artisans. Okay, they were grouped, and according to that they used to live. Okay, there were Shrenis or guilds, that is organization of crafts producers and merchants in the cities. Okay, so this was how the urban population being divided in the time of 6th century BCE to 6th century CE. Okay, now we'll discuss in the next paragraph, that is about trade in the subcontinent and beyond. It's very important, as we know that urban population, its origin is when the population or the area starts with trade and commerce. So we'll learn here about the trade in the subcontinent and beyond, means overseas or overland, in far distant areas. So how far this in Indian subcontinent had relation of trade and commerce with different places. Okay, so you'll get it in page number of your book 44, 6.3, trade in the subcontinent and beyond. So from 6th century BCE, land and river routes crisscrossed the subcontinent. What do you mean by crisscross? Crisscross means a busy network of sea route and land route was present from the 6th century BCE. That is why? Because of trade and commerce. Okay, when trade starts, we need communication system. So land routes, sea routes were there, and it extended in various directions. Number one, overland into Central Asia. Okay, it stretched up to Central Asia and beyond. Then overseas also, sea routes were also there, from ports that dotted the coastline extending across the Arabian Sea and to East and North Africa and West Asia. Okay, when you see the map of India, you will come to know that the west side of the southern tip of India, there lies the Arabian Sea. So from Arabian Sea also sea routes were being connected, okay, through the Arabian Sea towards North Africa and West Asia, and towards the east, which ocean is there? The Bay of Bengal. And from Bay of Bengal, the sea route stretched up to Southeast Asia, that is to China also. Okay, then successful merchants designated as Mastuvan in Tamil and Sethis and Satavahas in Prakrit. Okay, so there were different names being given to businessmen or tradesmen or merchants. Okay, in southern India, they were known as Mastuvan, okay, in Tamil, and Sethis and Satavahas in Prakrit language. Okay, so different names in different language. The merchants had been named, and thus, according to the inscriptions, these names have been found, and historians and archaeologists have come up with the knowledge that trade flourished with different merchants also. Okay, merchants were there. Then what type of goods were being exported and imported? Okay, the goods were like salt, grain, cloth, metal ores. What is metal ores? Like iron ore. What is it? Not the finished product of the iron. Okay, the raw iron what we get from the underground. Okay, the metal ore, maybe iron also, gold also, silver also. These were being exported and imported, and finished products, stone, timber, medicinal plants were being exported and imported. Okay, then spices were specially exported to Roman Empire. In contemporary time, Roman Empire was also flourishing in European countries, in Europe. Okay, so those Roman Empire, they specially had high demand for spices from India, and which spice? That was pepper. Pepper. Okay, then some textiles and medicinal plants were transported across the Arabian Sea to Mediterranean places. Okay, so medicinal plants and textiles like silk and cotton, muslin cloths were being exported. Okay, so these were some trade products which were being active in the times of 6th century BCE to 6th century CE. Okay, then we come to the next part, that is coins and kings. Why coins and kings? In this period, okay, the kings, they had started to introduce coins for economic use. Okay, barter system and all you have done in your economics and all, how monetary system started. Okay, man did not know about money before, isn't it? They used to exchange goods for goods, and that is known as barter system, but it had many disadvantages, and thus it stopped. And gradually some authorities, kings and emperors, intellectual ones, they started to introduce monetary system. Okay, and thus we come to know about some coins of early periods. Okay, so coins and kings. Why kings? Because coins are mainly related when it has to be introduced or minted, an authority is needed. Okay, an authority is needed to do it. It cannot be done by every common man. If every house start to, or every man start to mint coin, what will happen? Monetary system will never last. Okay, there will be chaos in the country or in the area or in the region or the kingdom. Okay, so sole power of minting coin is given to an authority. So that was the king. Okay, so number one, the first coin which was coined or made or minted was the punch marked coins. PUNCH. You'll get in your book, punch marked coins. Okay, punch marked coins. These were made of silver and copper in the 6th century BCE onwards, and were amongst the earliest to be minted and used. It was the earliest coin used that was the punched marked. How was it punched? A sheet of a metal, that is mainly the silver or the copper, was taken and it was pressed on an imprint of the king's image, okay, or any sign or writing, and it was pressed on the metal, okay, on the metal sheet, and cut into some shapes, round or rectangle, according to the coin introduced by the king. So that was known as the punch marked coins. Okay, so next one is coins were issued by kings, merchants, bankers and townspeople also issued some of these coins. So in some places we find that the permission from the king was given to some merchants also to mint coins, or to some bankers or townspeople. Okay, that was according to the permission of the king. Then the first coins to bear the names and images of rulers were issued by the Indo-Greeks. The Indo-Greek people, they were the one to introduce on the coin the name of the king and the picture of the king. Okay, the first gold coin. Now after copper and silver came gold coins, and who introduced it and who issued it first was the Kushanas. K-U-S-H-A-N-A-S, or you can write Kushans also. Okay, so they were the one who first introduced the gold coins in 1st century CE. Okay, hoards of Roman coins have been found from archaeological sites in South India. Hoards here means collection been done maybe in a container like that archaeologists have received. Hoards of gold coins of Roman Empire. Okay, in where? In South India. So what does it reveal? What does it say? It says that there was trade and commerce going between Indian people and the Roman Empire. Okay, so that is also one proof or source which help us to know that there was trade going on in that period between the Indian subcontinent and the Roman Empire. Okay, then comes some coins were issued in Punjab and Haryana region also of that period. So these were like the kings or communities like the Yaduyas of Punjab. Yaduyas, Y-A-U-D-H-E-Y-A-S. Okay, so Yaduyas also, they used to mint coins. Okay, then the most spectacular gold coins were of the Gupta Empire. We learnt about Gupta Empire. Who was the founder of Gupta Empire? Sri Gupta, isn't it? And so this empire is also famous as the Golden Empire. And in this period, the most beautiful gold coins belong to this Gupta rulers. Okay, so we'll come across this numismatics. Okay, this comes. What do you mean by numismatics? Numismatics is the study of coins. Okay, many coins have been found to the help of excavations by the archaeologists. Okay, so how did they study it? That of which period it is? Okay, what is the metal used in this coin? How they have studied? This study is known as numismatics. Okay, when you study the coin, the script written on it, what script is it, all these, what metal has been used, any mixed metals are there or not. Okay, it is of which age, which era, okay, which century, all these are being studied in the numismatics. Okay, so study of coins is known as numismatics. So this question also comes, very important. what do you mean by numismatics? Okay, so today I'll end up here. In the next video we'll conclude this chapter, and this the concluding part of this chapter is very important. It talks about the limitations of inscription as a source for reconstructing history. Okay, so this what I told you about the question, the limitation of inscription to reconstruct history. What are the limitations? Okay, this one we will discuss, and it's very important. It carries 5 to 6 marks. Okay, so you go through that also, and in the next video I will discuss and explain to you all. Okay, so today up to here. Thank you.
Stay home, stay safe,
Do it for self.
do it for your family, do it for India.
Let's break the chain of COVID-19.
हम होंगे कामयाब, जय हिंद। हम होंगे कामयाब, जय हिंद।
हम होंगे कामयाब। जय हिंद।